Hello everyone, welcome to the nmap for penetration testing course. In this course, we're going to be helping you master network mapping and enumeration with nmap. All right, now in this introductory video, we're going to be taking a look at what nmap is exactly and how it works, and then we'll take a look at some of the core features of nmap and how we can use nmap as a penetration tester. And finally, we'll take a look at how we can run nmap and a basic anatomy of an nmap scan, essentially taking a look at some of the results we get and how to differentiate them. All right, so let's get started with understanding what nmap is exactly. Nmap, or Network Mapper, is an open source cross-platform network scanning and security auditing utility that provides valuable information regarding hosts on a network. All right, so from that definition, you kind of understand what it's used for. It's used to essentially get an inventory of all the devices on a network, and it also allows you to perform various forms of security auditing on those particular devices on the network. So it's mainly used for detecting live hosts on the network, detecting and testing firewalls, and enumeration of services on that are currently running on a host. All right, so that's just a basic idea of what nmap is. Now, in regards to how it works, nmap works by sending specially crafted packets onto a network, and it then uses the responses from the host on the target to determine what hosts are active, what operating systems they're running, what services are running, and whether a stateful firewall is present. So a quick analogy that will help you understand this is by simply saying hello to someone or saying hello to a room. And of course, based on the responses, you're able to deduce whether someone is there or someone isn't there. And of course, that's the analogy of a school or a teacher in school taking the roll call, or asking for whether a student is present or absent. And so he calls out the name, and based on the response, the teacher is able to tell if the student is there. And the same goes with nmap. It essentially sends packets onto a network, and then based on the responses, it's able to determine whether the host is active, what operating system they're running, what services they're running, so on and so forth. All right, so this information helps penetration testers identify vulnerabilities and misconfigurations so that they can be patched or mitigated. Right, so you can use nmap to detect various vulnerabilities in services, identify vulnerable services, identify active hosts, so on and so forth. We'll take a look at all of this during the course. Now, let's take a look at some of the core features of nmap that make it such a useful tool. One of them that we've already covered is performing network mapping and host discovery. So it allows you to map your networks and identify live hosts on that network. Secondly, we have port scanning. This is very important. So this allows you to scan for open ports on a target. And then we move on to operating system detection, which is also a very, very important feature that nmap allows you to use. And that is the ability to detect what operating system version is running on the target. And this is very useful for penetration testers, as it can help them understand what system they're dealing with beforehand. We go over to the next feature, which is service version detection. So service version detection is, again, the ability to detect the version of the service that is running on a particular port on a target. So for example, if a target is running FTP, nmap will allow you to identify what version of FTP is running, and through that you can then perform vulnerability analysis on that particular version to identify whether it's vulnerable to a particular exploit, or it's whether or not it's been misconfigured in any way. You then have service enumeration, which is a key part of this course, and the use of nmap scripts. So again, you can use nmap to extract useful information from services using the functionality of the nmap scripting engine and nmap scripts. You then have firewall detection and evasion. So you can actually use nmap to evade firewalls, to detect and evade firewalls through various techniques like packet fragmentation, IP spoofing, and the use of decoys. All right, so those are the core features of nmap, and that's why it's such a fantastic tool for penetration testers. Now, the next question, of course, is how can I run nmap? Now, nmap is a multi-platform tool, as I mentioned in the earlier slide. That means it can be installed on Linux, BSD, any variant of Unix, Mac OS, and Windows. So the Windows version comes usually with the npcap or the pcap driver. And that's very important because with the Windows version, you also get the GUI version, and the GUI version of nmap is called ZenMap, on Linux and any of the other Unix based distributions, ZenMap needs to be installed separately. I'll be covering the installation in the next video in this module before we actually get started with using the tool, so you don't have to worry about that. Now let's take a look at a basic nmap scan. Let's take a look at the results that are returned to us. This will help us prepare for what we'll be going through in the course. So you can see I'm currently using Kali Linux, or the image in this, the results from this image, you can clearly tell that I'm using Kali Linux, which is a penetration testing distribution. And the scan is as follows. I run a simple scan and I provide an argument with the F argument, which performs a fast scan on particular ports, and I then provide an IP for my target on the network. So nmap starts, it gives us some very important information, like when the scan was started. That is very important information for a penetration tester in their reports. And then you get the report for the IP. It also gives us an idea of all the ports that were scanned, the number of ports. In this case, the number of ports that was scanned was 100 ports. So it tells us that 82 ports were closed, and then it gives you a summary of all the ports that were open. And this is sorted out in terms of the port, the state, and the service. All right. So the port gives you the port number and the protocol. In this case, you can see it varies. In this case, it is a TCP scan. So all the ports are currently on TCP, and we have the state of the port. So in this case, it can be open, closed, or filtered. When it comes down to the port state being filtered, it means there could possibly be a stateful firewall. And then we have the service that's running, but however, we haven't performed service version detection, so it'll only display the version that's running on those particular ports. In this case, you can see for port 21 we have FTP, for port 22 SSH, so on and so forth. And finally, it gives you the MAC address of the target, and finally a summary tells us that the host is up and the scan completion time. So that is just a basic anatomy of an nmap scan and the results that you are likely to get when scanning for, when scanning particular targets or hosts on a network. That being said, that's going to be it for this lecture. I'll be seeing you in the next lecture.